Hello, I'm Dave March, the Spy Guy, and I'm coming to you live, or not so live if you're watching this in the future, in the White House Situation Room, which is not currently occupied right now. I had one of my guests on once, and he commented like, "Oh, that's a really neat office space you got set up there." I'm like, it's a green screen." Anyways, I'm I've kind of been trying to doing different things and experimenting with the show, and decided kind of to do kind of like not a news hour. It won't be necessarily always an hour, but I'm going to do kind of like reactions to various videos that I find on the internet and give commentary where the commentaries do. So I'm wanted to first start off by talking about this whole mass shooting that just happened in Canada yesterday, and the internet reaction of like it was a woman who in a dress that shot all the people. It's hard to say what, and the minute that dropped, a bunch of people, especially in the United States, just went, "Oh, it must be a trans woman." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, guys, but it's rare. But women do have mass shootings. The very first mass shooting. I was going to look this up first, but uh, tell me why I don't like why I don't like Mondays. I Don't Like Mondays, a song by the Boomtown Rats, and it's based on reading it that a shooting spree. The first real mass shooting happened in Georgia State University campus on the shooting spree of 16-year-old Brenda Ann Spencer, who fired from her bedroom window at children in a school playground at Grover Cleveland Elementary School in 1979. Killing 2 adults and injuring 8 children and 1 police officer. She showed no remorse for her crime. Her explanation for her actions was, "I don't like Mondays." We also see a lot more mass shootings by women, or like not necessarily shootings. There's not a lot of guns in Japan, but there are a lot of attacks on men in Japan, and by these women, lonely women who go to these party sites and try to pay, and there's like this weird club culture of women buying from hot guys and influencers that they find online. And I've seen some of the reports on that. It's very disturbing and shows you just how badly Japanese culture kind of got screwed up. But they're like, some of the women will go nuts and stab these men once they realize what kind of con game they've been going through. So we don't know anything about this. For me, the reason why I don't think it's necessarily a trans shooter is because Americans don't really understand Canadian healthcare that well. If you want to have the kind of healthcare needs that you would need to have a trans kid, you're not going to find it in middle of nowhere, British Columbia. Is it possible it's a trans person? I suppose, but I just find it unlikely that if that happened in Vancouver, yes, you would. That's where you're going to find all the trans people. If you're a parent doing that stuff and you're really going to do it, really want to do this, you're moving to Vancouver, maybe Victoria, or another large city where the healthcare system exists to support such a transition. I doubt that's going to be happening in the middle of nowhere in British Columbia. I might be wrong. Maybe they've gone through the full conversion process and it's gotten to this far. There's some other things that are kind of weird about this case, in the sense that normally, you start at if you're a school shooter, you start at the school, and that's where you go through and kill a bunch of people. It's hard. Guns with multiple caliber rounds, like large clip guns, are kind of rare here. Especially, I mean, they're older guns that are available, and it's kind of possible maybe the person is in the reserve training force or something like that and got access to firearms that way, or they got guns doing some other stuff. Like maybe they got their grandfather's. A friend of mine, he owns a Kalashnikov. He's got the Czech variant because you can't buy the actual Kalashnikov in Canada. That's not allowed. But he got one from Czechoslovakia. And that's also led into a little story, and I won't get into that now. But it is possible to get a large round magazine gun here. Most of the guns here are, hunting rifles, shotguns. Maybe the person had a lot. And it also sounds like they just they started at one place and then went to school. So maybe they married their parents and then decided to go to school. We just don't know enough about this really to speculate on this. And I'm just like shocked to see Turning Point USA's got it trending online saying they're covering up another trans shooter in Canada. I'm just like, look, it may well be a trans shooter, but we just don't know enough. It will be hard to keep that covered up here for very long. If it is true, you got dozens of witnesses that are going to come out and go on. People are going to be blogging about this stuff, talking to reporters. The Rebel News will be there talking to people. We'll know very quickly what's actually happening in the next 72 hours about this story. But the fact that they just assume immediately just says, I think, a lot about like the distrust for the institutions in the United States. Canada does not, we are not experiencing the same level of wokery as even in BC. I doubt outside the cities, we just have never been, I never experienced that kind of stuff at the workplace. So that's just my perspective. And I was working at Uber Freight, which is a very American centered Uber culture. Like they have a lot of groups for all those types of things out there. But it was never felt to be pushed upon us. It was just more like I felt they were obligated by the corporate to do these things, so they did them. They could care less. If the DEI programs didn't matter, no one cared. The head guy in charge was a very, very conservative black man. So all that kind of stuff was just not the thing that happened there. Anyway, so I'm going to get into some of the other stuff I want to do here. I'm going to share a video about Steve Bannon and comment on it. Here we go. It's kind of a short clip.
Question about that. All right. But I happen to think
she thinks Bannon's a patriot. I'm not too sure about that, having read a lot of those emails or seen some of the stuff and heard speculation from a lot of people who think that Bannon is an agent of the bad guys, a plant inside the Trump administration, and someone in like controlled opposition trying to do this, and that what he's doing here is sabotaging things about the Trump administration. This woman here from Promethean Action has a different perspective, and I'll let her play out a bit.
He's totally wrong on his current approaches towards President Trump. His theory of the case is the midterms are all about the base, and what we really have to be doing is throwing constant red meat to the base.
I don't agree with I agree with that. That's probably what he's saying, but he might be doing that intentionally to stoke out the outrage to suppress turnout. I mean, the man did go to jail for President Trump, so there's that, but also like it is like hard to say. We've seen too much stuff with Bannon to really think too much about what he's been thinking.
So that means even if the public is horrified by what's going on in Minnesota, we should just keep it up because you can't give in to the terrorists. All right. Here's the real story. The midterms are going to be won by the coalition.
Right. This is something that I know my friend Rich Ferris talks about all the time. We need to work on the coalition.
Which actually won in 2024, where we brought everybody into MAGA. Trade unionists, former Democrats, the independent voters, all of those people have to be reached. And what Steve Bannon and others are not talking about at this point is Donald Trump's American system economic revolution.
He has started.
That's what the public has to understand. Yeah.
Bannon has started to talk about that because he sees which way the wind is blowing and needs to start emphasizing that stuff.
The voters said, get rid of 15 million people who we don't even know who they are. All right. What Trump is saying is, okay, having people killed on national TV is not really a great way to go about accomplishing that. And it's very clear that the rioters want more people killed.
Yeah. That's the thing. These rioters are intentionally setting themselves up into this thing. We've created, the Democrats played with fire, and they created this communist mess in Minnesota and other places. And this is a festering wound, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think ICE kind of blindly stumbled into this thing, and there's a lot of people out there that are perfectly fine with seeing leftists killed, but we're not at that point yet.
They want people suicided. They want this particular kind of chaos. So Trump is flanking it. He's coming out and saying, here's the real story. The reason why you're seeing all this crap against ICE right here is because this is how the Democratic Party has funded itself in Minnesota.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They created this mess on purpose, and then they can stoke up their minions every time to try to change the message about the theft. Problem is, the revolutionaries hate the Democrats too and want them dead as well.
Through actually ripping off the government, through having immigrant fraud on major government programs, by pocketing the cash themselves. It's a massive fraud scandal. So I'm going to continue the enforcement. We got agreements to actually take out the criminals in the jails for the first time. But
yeah, they traced back Waltz's cash and how much money he's defrauded the American people, and are basically using that against him. Like, yeah, we have all this stuff now. You either comply or we come for your money.
We're not going to have head-to-head confrontations between a bunch of anarchists and federal government, which plays the enemy's game. We're going to flank it. So that's what I think Bannon is just wrong. It's not feeding red meat to what he conceives of as the base. It is actually going out and recruiting tons more people into MAGA who don't fit the ideological purity test necessarily. And it means recruiting them on.
Yep. Yeah, that's the strategy. That's what we need to do.
The basis of Trump's economic policies, which you never really hear him talk about. Bannon is a patriot.
Yeah. So that was that little video. Next one I wanted to talk to you guys about is, oh yes, this one was something that came across my feed yesterday. It's a very interesting kind of thing about what's going on in with the Epstein and the secret program to make modern AI. It's kind of invite guest. I will share the screen of this one, and this one's really interesting stuff. Off air with Ron Chapman. And
going to change the way that you look at AI forever. It's not going to be pleasant to hear, but it's going to be very important. I intended on waiting until we hit 100,000. I'm going to bring you the story of the new eugenics, Jeffrey Epstein, the godfather of artificial intelligence. It was a DARPA program. For those who don't know what DARPA is, it's the CIA-backed research wing that does a lot of research into technology, and it's been the godfather of many very famous technologies, including Facebook, as I'm about to show you.
Yeah, and it also has the fact that if anything is more than 20% efficient, it gets seized by the government. And there's a lot of weird stuff that's happened where people have made like interesting technologies, and the government just pays you a lot of money, and then it owns it. And how much of that stuff that the government basically steals from the inventors is actually just being made by DARPA, and then DARPA claims they made it and not the guy who did it.
For you right now, DARPA LifeLog was a program that was launched by DARPA. You can go online and look for the request for proposal. The design of this program was supposed to capture all Americans' information, put it into a LifeLog, track it, build it over time so that you can create an electronic database of every American, and in fact, almost everybody in the world. Well, when congressional hearings started related to LifeLog, It was quickly killed by DARPA. Why? Because it came to the surface, because people learned about it, and because people became very concerned about the impact of all of their information online. This was 2003. This was back when we were a little bit more concerned about what we put into the computer. We weren't too far away from dial-up modems and AOL, and Bill Gates was still a name that was regularly talked about. As soon as LifeLog became public, DARPA quickly killed it. And they killed it on February 4th, 2004. That date is significant because that's also the date that a young hoodie-clad Mark Zuckerberg, sitting in a Harvard dorm room, launched what he called then the Facebook. The Facebook was designed as just a Harvard campus project. That's all Mark Zuckerberg intended it to be. But then
we think. Now, how much it could be that's he thought it was that, we think. I remember going on the Harvard tour back in 2019, and the guy giving the tour was like, yep, I have the professor who I have this one sociology professor or feminist professor, and she was so glad to be the one responsible for kicking Mark Zuckerberg out of Harvard for creating Facebook.
of course, he met the Winklevoss brothers, two relatively wealthy and backed individuals who worked with him on the project. And if you believe the movies, Mark Zuckerberg went in a different direction than the Winklevoss twins, but that's not the real story. The real story is right after Facebook launched, it got tens of thousands of users. 50% of them were on Harvard campus, and it struggled to get off the ground in other campuses. It wasn't until a tech CEO, Peter Thiel, then of PayPal, and a relatively famous figure in the Conservative Party now today, came to Mark Zuckerberg, a relatively unknown individual on Harvard campus, and offered him $500,000.
Yeah, and also just remember, Peter Thiel also was in the Epstein files, where Epstein said, "You, of course, know I represent the Rothschilds." Like, what the hell?
Now, the one thing that you should all understand about Peter Thiel is at that point, he was what's called an angel investor, but he was a different kind of angel investor. He actually paid individuals to drop out of college and commit themselves to his causes. Thiel's club has launched some of the most famous tech startups. He's been behind nearly every single one of them. Reid Hoffman with LinkedIn was started right around this time period. Now, if we go back and look at Peter Thiel and say, why did he spend $500,000 on this project? Why was he one of the first venture capitalists? Why was he offering this kind of money to people like Mark Zuckerberg? You have to understand about what he built at that point in time. You see, Peter Thiel was the founder of a program called Palantir. Palantir is the
and depending on who you say Palantir is either pure evil, child, or a force for good. I think it's. I'd rather have it in Peter Thiel's hands than some Democrat. That being said, who knows what will take over afterwards? We already know what the other guy thinks.
Nectar. Palantir is the brain, but the brain doesn't have the data that it needs in order to figure out artificial intelligence. Palantir is a company that takes existing information and it connects that information together to draw conclusions. It's been going for a very long time. I used it when I was in the Marine Corps in Afghanistan, and I've spoken widely about Palantir because of how much I know about it. But Palantir is nothing unless it has users to put in data. That's where LifeLog came into play. The intent was people like John Poindexter of DARPA, the CIA, and the U.S.
And also supposedly a member of Majestic 12.
military, Department of Defense, felt that they would be able to just get a project to collect this information that was government funded. But when there was pushback by the American public, they had to go a different way. And DARPA playboy Peter Thiel decided to go the way of a young hoodie-clad college kid to get the information that he deeply sought to make the connections he needed in order to control so much about our environment. For those of you who think the rags to riches story of Mark Zuckerberg is some amazing tale that we should tell our grandchildren, think again. Just about every social media entrepreneur back in the day of Peter Thiel's tech startups was blessed by DARPA. Why didn't MySpace win over Facebook? It didn't have DARPA backing. Why did LinkedIn win over the dozens and dozens of programs that were available that did similar things around that time? It was because of Peter Thiel and DARPA. Why did Instagram become so big? Peter Thiel and DARPA. Spotify. Peter Thiel,
I'm beginning to think Peter Thiel is DARPA.
and DARPA. Just about every single aspect of your digital life, Peter Thiel and DARPA backed, blessing people in exchange for one thing: a backdoor of information to be collected from users, cell phone location, and a tremendous amount of user data. Now, what does this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? That's the curious part. A lot of people aren't aware that Jeffrey Epstein is one of the first godfathers of artificial intelligence. Back in 2002, he had a conference where he supported some of the most famous names in artificial intelligence who were intending to solve a problem at that time. If you wanted a clean, reassuring origin story for modern artificial intelligence, you'd probably start with a university lab, a whiteboard, and a grad student surviving on ramen noodles. You'd not start with a private Caribbean island owned by Jeffrey Epstein. And yet, in the spring of 2002, a group of prominent computer scientists met with Epstein on his property for what was dubbed a common sense symposium. This was later documented in a 2003 AI magazine paper that thanked Epstein for his generous support. What were all these AI researchers gathering for? It was to solve a problem in AI. The topic itself was academically respectable: how to give machines the everyday common sense humans use consistently without even noticing. The venue for solving this problem was uniquely Epstein, and it's the kind of venue that institutional ethics would be very concerned about. The 2002 symposium, located in the Virgin Islands, founded by Jeffrey Epstein, was a gathering that was later described in print, one that brought together the most influential artificial intelligence figures, including Marvin Minsky, MIT's AI lab founder, Ken Ford, NASA, and DARPA ties. Their shared goal was technical: to solve the common sense problem, the gap between machines that can recognize patterns and machines that can reason like a normal human being about normal human things. Like why you shouldn't store ice cream in the oven. This is very important because the common sense problem has always been a but of AI. It was never really addressed, but it failed many projects. Pattern recognition can be astonishing.
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there right now. I'm trying to apply for pattern recognition stuff. Not as very successful, but I really do need to apply, and I've been working on this.
Reasoning about the world like a person, that's where AI tends to trip up. And in order to solve the common sense problem, it's common sense that you need a lot of money. And that's where Jeffrey Epstein was very skilled. Some people, in fact, said that he collected scientists like some people might collect art. Why was he doing all of this? Well, it's because he had his own nefarious motives. So,
yep, definitely. We have all these people who even met him afterwards, perfectly respectable people. Eric Weinstein, who just had a trigonometry episode dropped, need to check out. But he said, I went to meet with him because I just wanted to know what this thing was. Like, what is this? This guy's a construction of some sort. This does not make any sense to me.
So in 2002, the AI researchers gather, they talk, a paper is published that thanks Jeffrey Epstein for all of the support. And then the researchers scatter the globe and start working in their individual tech companies. And out springs Facebook, LinkedIn. The technology from PayPal spiraled across the globe and started collecting data for Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein himself. But Jeffrey Epstein didn't stop there. According to MIT's commissioned investigation, Epstein donated roughly $850,000 to MIT between 2002 and 2017. After the Virgin Islands meeting, it was very important that this research gets done, and Jeffrey Epstein paid for it. But he paid a lot more to others. He even paid $750,000 to MIT after his 2008 conviction that everybody's well aware of.
And they were happy to take his money. What's a little, just because it comes from a guy who did terrible things to children. Oh, no, we're going to take money from them. But then again, they took plenty of money from Nazis too. So there you go.
Now, the donations to MIT paled in comparison to what he purportedly gave to Harvard. Harvard had an investigation after it was found that they received such a large donation from Jeffrey Epstein, $6.5 million donated by Jeffrey Epstein, most of it in the hands of a researcher named Martin Novak. I'm going to talk a bit about Martin Novak because he's very important here. Martin Novak was the founder of the PED laboratory at Harvard. This was the laboratory that Jeffrey Epstein had a private office in. He had a swipe card and access to the entire building. And even after his conviction, he was able to visit many times, over 40 times. The PED laboratory was part of the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. Now, you could hear the words evolutionary dynamics and think that this is a groundbreaking concept, but what it really is a dressed up version of eugenics. Martin Novak is originally a...
Yep. So much stuff coming out on the eugenics stuff, and because Hitler made such a bad word, but they were already working on rehabilitating eugenics into the common spaces once again. So this is not that new to me in that sense. The Huxleys of the world, the heads of the eugenics societies, this is all comes out of British imperial thinking about stuff, about why was the English ruling the world? It was because they were a superior being to the rest of the humanity. No, the British were ruling the world because they're the only ones in Europe who start drinking at noon.
Mathematician, and most of his research was based on the idea of cooperation. Why some parts of the species might cooperate with others, even if it ultimately leads to their own demise. You see, people like Epstein and Novak were absolutely obsessed with the future of the human race and the problems of the human race that are caused by reverse Darwinism. The idea that as we become more technologically advanced, we as a people will begin to fail. And I think to some extent, we do see some of that evidence present. But
that's what part of this show is all about.
Took it to an extreme extent. Investigations later described Epstein as being physically present, treated as a known quantity, and given institutional accommodations that go well beyond a pat on the back and thanks for your support, and look a lot more like integration into Harvard itself. With Jeffrey Epstein entrenched at PED and also at MIT, he had commanded respect in two of the most important institutions that were developing research in the area of AI and ultimately eugenics. MIT's Media Laboratory famously referred to Jeffrey Epstein as Voldemort, or the one who should not be named. They avoided saying his...
Wow. We got, look just at this. We got Voldemort, Epstein. His crony over in England is the Prince of Darkness. Like, maybe there is something to this satanic stuff.
Name, because they knew who he was, they knew what he was about, but they just couldn't stop taking his money for research. The logic's almost poetic in its candor. If a donor's name must not be spoken, everyone already knows where the money is. If the plan is anonymous and not publicized, the institution's admitting it's not proud of where it's getting its donations. Epstein had positioned himself globally as a connector, and certainly inside of the United States as a connector in many different institutions. But he was ultimately the funder of artificial intelligence and this sort of research. Starting in 2002 in the Virgin Islands, moving forward to large donations, he kept very firm relationships at MIT and Harvard, even after his convictions. But what's more troubling are some of the statements that Jeffrey Epstein would later make that reveal what he was really trying to develop with all of these donations. Now, before we get into that, I want to take a second. I would certainly appreciate it if you would consider subscribing and potentially becoming a member. I, along with Legacy Podcasting, put together this program for you, and it takes a lot of resources, and that subscribe means so much to me, and your membership does as well. Now, you might say, okay, Ron, what's the connection between Jeffrey Epstein, Facebook, and DARPA? And that's where a gentleman named John Poindexter comes into play. He's a former NASA director who led DARPA. He led the Information Awareness Office. He was actually the founder of the Information Awareness Program that I mentioned to you earlier. He founded the Total Information Awareness Initiative that was the program designed to get information on nearly every single American citizen. And of course, when that went out of favor, he had to find a way to get Americans to willingly give up the information themselves. And according to Wired's reporting, Poindexter met with Peter Thiel and Palantir co-founder Alex Karp in 2004 and told them that he had an interesting idea to apply data mining techniques from fraud detection to counter terrorism operations. Experts like Poindexter were really trying to solve post 9/11 problems, and that
Solve them, or did 9/11 happen to allow them to solve those problems? You create the crisis, and then you have to provide the solutions. I'm not saying that necessarily this is all true, but it does seem to be. It did allow them to get all this stuff. So we always get a little conspiratorial on the show. That's the nature of the murky world we're in.
that's where total information awareness came about. Of course, they had the benefit of a law passed by Congress at the time that George Bush was president and signed by President Bush, allowing almost complete access to the public's information and instilling FISA courts. At that point in time, the government was at the most powerful. The CIA, DARPA would be able to get as much information as they possibly could. And with the aid of Facebook, and fast forward over 20 years, CIA officials would tell you that the number one source of information on the American public are apps like Facebook, Spotify, and LinkedIn. Shortly after, we would learn that Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, would sponsor a dinner in Palo Alto, placing Epstein at the table with Musk, Zuckerberg, and Thiel, all of which who would move forward and champion cryptocurrency as a tool for the future. They realized that the information is great, but the financial system is still tied to governments, and deleveraging the financial system from the government would allow this sort of technocrat explosion to occur and ultimately give them the power that they need. Now, great, you've got Bitcoin spiraling forward. You've got all of the information that you want on Americans. You have them willingly giving over their information, and you no longer need the Total Information Awareness Program. You're moving forward full steam ahead. But then a gentleman named Edward Snowden, who I once would have villainized, but now I might consider championing, came.
Yeah, so same here. It's like, oh my God. Wow. My, have the tables turned for us.
Forward with information about a program called PRISM. I've done episodes before on the startup of PRISM and how that came from software that was stolen by the government around the time that Bill Clinton was in office, had the ability to connect.
It was weird. Why steal it when you could buy it?
Information on all Americans and also collect information overseas. Edward Snowden was a whistleblower and told us how the CIA and the NSA would have the ability to collect information on every single American through all the digital devices that they had. That's where your information from Facebook was going. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a law that prevents America from spying on its own citizens. But when they give that information up willingly, all you need is a back door. That's one of the reasons why it was so important for Peter Thiel and John Poindexter to start these sorts of operations. That's another reason why Donald Trump pushed so hard, along with Joe Biden, in a unanimous effort to try to reduce TikTok in the United States. You see, if your government has control of Facebook, if your government has control of Google, and the Chinese don't have control of those, you're safe. But when a Chinese application starts to come into the United States and collect just as much information, that spells problems. In fact, I think what we did with TikTok is almost the greatest admission that your government is behind the information collection of Facebook and Google. And so, of course, Edward Snowden blows the whistle. We finally learn
why the Russians and Chinese don't necessarily want these programs in their countries.
what PRISM is, and some of the information that we can gain from that is absolutely alarming. But that still wasn't a signal that it was used domestically. And we wouldn't find that out until the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I'm going to talk a bit about Cambridge Analytica, but I think it's important that we get to it in another episode as well. So make sure you hit like and subscribe on this one so that you can get notification of that. Also, in my last book, Truth and Persuasion, I wrote an entire chapter on the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And while I'm going to give you some new information and new research, it would be important to get some background in that book, Truth and Persuasion. It's essentially how the digital environment has changed us drastically. If you got a copy of the book or if you read it, let me know in the comments. Make sure you tag me in it, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts about the book. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, for those who don't know, started well before it hit the United States. You see, Facebook and Peter Thiel connected a back door inside of Facebook software. That back door allowed certain other institutions and entities to get a hold of information. Cambridge Analytica paid Facebook a lot of money for a contract that allowed it to get not just the information on the individual user, but also get information on their friends and data that might have been already located inside of their phone. That meant that when you logged into Facebook, Facebook was storing not just your data, not just your user data, but also data from the friends that you'd connected with, whether or not they'd opted in on those privacy settings. Facebook settled a very large lawsuit with its users and immediately tightened up after the scandal. But the problem is not just that Facebook leaked the information, it's why. You see, as you know, Peter Thiel was early in on the founding of Facebook, and those back doors are very important, especially when they go to his friends. Now, most of you know that I'm a relatively conservative person, but
Yeah, it's concerning that, what I say is that it's interesting for conservatives to do this, but then it goes in the hands of people like Epstein, or if there's other people out there, it's kind of concerning that we're dealing with that. It's one thing for Peter Thiel to have this, but I'm not happy with his partner at all. And who else is getting benefits from this? So the technology has existed, and we gave up our stuff to them, but
fight power wherever power is, especially if it gets corrupt, and I take issue with what happened here. So I hope you're a bit patient with me. Peter Thiel, a well-known conservative, but also somebody who believed that Brexit was a good thing, and also somebody who believed that Donald Trump should get into office in 2016. And while I will not say the Cambridge Analytica scandal was the result of Trump's presidency, what I will say is that it is the result of a database of information that very well can be used for bad. Mm-hmm. And it's very possible we may not have another free and fair election in our country's future. The founder of Cambridge Analytica was from a marketing firm, and he teamed up with a very smart programmer. They decided that they would try to influence some elections overseas, which was a great way to make a lot of investors a ton of money. They tried it in a few countries, Singapore and others, with some mixed results.
Yeah.
They were refining it before they brought it into the UK and also to the United States. When they had almost 50,000 data points on every single American, enough to know just about everything about you, they decided to spring it loose to the highest bidder. What does that lead to? And what's the impact of that? Well, when Facebook knows a lot about you, Cambridge Analytica knows a lot about you, they know that they can split you off into a silo. If I drive down the street and I see a billboard, I feel one way about it. Another person may feel another way about it. If it's a lawyer billboard, I probably want to punch it in the face.
True story. Talking to this guy who is a lawyer, and his rival law firm bought the billboard across the street from his house. Like jackassery.
Being a lawyer myself. But these aren't billboards. These are little personal signs that can be individually consumed, which means if you look for the fear signals that somebody normally reacts to, if you put a bunch of different types of advertisements in front of them until you finally get them to react, you will know exactly how they react to a certain stimulus. I talk about this in my book, Truth and Persuasion, but there's two types of thinking, System 1 and System 2 thinking. And the first type of thinking is the sort of quick reaction sort of thinking that we don't even really think about. The second type of thinking is the type of thinking that is very intentional and logical. We sit down and we chart things out. You probably don't remember your drive to work very well because you were engaged in System 1 thinking. But if you sit down to solve a problem at work, you very well may be engaged in System 2 thinking. When we react to these fear signals on the internet, the Cambridge Analytica signals that get put in front of us, They appeal to our system one thinking, which means we aren't as conscious of what we are doing and the choices we're making. I've often said when I'm looking at a jury of 12 as a lawyer standing up in front of them arguing in a case, for the first time in history, these 12 people may have absolutely nothing in common with each other. They may be operating from very different algorithms. They may be basically speaking the same language. One person may be getting a whole bunch of Russian misinformation. Another person may very well be getting a lot of liberal misinformation. And another person may be getting some fear signals that are just completely out of left field. It's one of the reasons why at Thanksgiving, when you ask your uncle to pass the gravy, he might respond with something like, if you believe that the Charlie Kirk shooter did it, no. And he throws it in your face. That's because these algorithms are crazy and they're designed to silo individuals and get them to react to their own different fear signals to get them entrenched into a belief.
There's a great movie on Netflix you can watch that I watched and made me no. I didn't delete my Facebook account, but I drastically reduced use of it. And called The Social Net, not The Social Network, Social Experiment or something like that. Anyways, it showed me they had a great one where they decided the moderate middle or the extreme middle. They didn't want to mock the extreme right or the extreme left as it was the extreme middle. And so throughout the movie, like when they're doing, people are like, it's the extreme middle, it's breaking us all apart. Anyways, I'm going to go on to our third video for you guys today, and for those who watch later. And this is going to be another one of those Johnny Vedmore videos where he's talking about the WEF and how it came to be and who Klaus Schwab is and a bunch of goodness that way. Oh,
right. It's 25 past something in the evening in the UK, and I'm joined by investigative journalist par excellence, Johnny Vedmore. We've done a video about Nicola Junkerman and the Epstein files, and about how you are in the Epstein files as a journalist of concern. We've also done a video about fifth generation warfare, which is what is being used to wage war against us and destroy our communities and our livelihoods. And here we're going to be talking about what is it that is common with the people that I mentioned, plus many, many more. Who are other names that came through that first cohort?
No, it was a lot. It was called, originally it was called the World Economic Forum's Global Leaders for Tomorrow, and was rebranded later the Young Global Leaders, or the Forum for Young Global Leaders. But the first round, 1993, well, that was Bill Gates, Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, Tony Blair. I think Larry Summers is in there. You got Richard Branson. You got Viktor Orban.
a bunch of names that have been showing up in the files recently. Though the last one he's going to mention is definitely not aligned with those people.
Van is in there. He's a surprise for a lot of people. It's not only that weirdly connected elite organization training program that Viktor Orban went through either. He went through the German Marshall Fund's Memorial Marshall Fund prize as well, so he's a scholar in many different ways. But the Young Global Leaders program is really an interesting thing to look at, because it's how, first of all, they train potential leaders of the future, and these potential leaders of the future tend to become the leaders of the future, probably because they've got this on their CV.
Yeah, there's also other people who've gone to it. Like one woman was Candice Bergen here, not the actress, but the MP. And she said she went to it, and she's like, they were offering her all sorts of stuff. And she's like, I can take a maximum $1,500 donation. Like, I will get kicked out of Parliament if this happens. And she had to stay in a hostel, and it's just sort of like she had to pay her own way, and it was not cheap. And she's just like, look, I can't take on all this, any of your gifts that you're offering me, because it violates Canadian election law.
And when I first looked into it, I was I had entered into it from a different view. I had been researching Klaus Schwab, and I had written an article for Unlimited Hangout with Whitney Webb. I'd written an article. It was one of my seminal pieces, my first really big major solo pieces that really hit home was Schwab family values, and went back into the Whitney Webb was like, it takes 6 weeks, go find out as much you can about Klaus Schwab, and then write see if there's anything about his father or his mother, and see what you can find. And so I found his father. It'd always all been rumor and conjecture, and many people who were saying his father was some Nazi general, and it was just false. It was a completely different family. The word Schwab is actually Schwabia. It comes from Uber
Or Schwabian, which is definitely a place. She's going to explain that.
Schwabia, which is a part of Germany. So they're people of Schwabia, they're Schwabs. And so there's a lot of people who were Jewish, who, when Jews were not allowed to live in the area, changed their name to the regions. So there's a lot of people who also, they just called themselves Schwab so that they could avoid racism or avoid any type of insurgents. And there was a lot of it there was blood libels in that area. So
lots of pogroms, and the Poles were probably the worst of them because what the Poles would do is they would make the Jews the tax collectors. And then when the revolts would happen, they wouldn't hit the nobles. They'd go kill the tax collectors first.
So I had already been investigating Schwab, and then I investigated his rise. I discovered his father had worked for a Nazi model company that had been working central to the atomic bomb program. And his father had run the Escher Weiss factory in Ravensburg in Germany. And then
didn't that factory provide armaments or work for the Nazis or something?
Yeah, it didn't only do that. It was actually it made casings for the potential nuclear bombs. It made fighter parts for the fighter planes. It made parts for missiles generally. It made U-boat submarine parts, but it also made large turbines for enriching uranium. And that was what was central behind it. And because his father had worked on the nuclear bomb program or the atomic bomb program for the Nazis after the war, they got denazification, and a lot of intelligence and a lot of Americans came in and basically recruited these guys one by one or co-opted them one by one. And by 1965, Eugen Schwab, that's Klaus Schwab's father, was telling Klaus Schwab that he needed to go to America to a certain thing called Kissinger's International Seminar to learn at Harvard at the center of power, really. Now, this Kissinger's International Seminar.
Oh, these people do get around, don't they? His father was telling them to go work for the Americans.
Then I went into studying Kissinger's International Seminar and Schwab's time in it. And Kissinger's International Seminar was the precursor to the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader program. Huh. The CIA had realized that they wanted to do coups in countries, but they realized also they needed leaders to implant into those countries.
And remember that guy who they're always talking about, the Russians killing? The guy who ran for the mayor of Moscow? He went through the same program at Harvard. They identify leaders in foreign countries. They bring them to their school, and then they retrain them into being foreign agents against their own countries.
Afterwards. And so by 1947 you had the CIA created. 1952 they do their first coup in
and where did they get the idea? From Cecil D. Rhodes, who did it to them. The Rhodes Scholarship Program is this is the latest version. This is the American version. First, the British sent to use the Rhodes Scholarship Program to co-opt young American elite in the lead up to World War II and during World War II. And then the CIA made their own and started doing it for themselves. So it's just like transfer of these different groups of people. Like they just move from place to place, transmitting their ideology.
Egypt, 1953, they're doing their second coup in Iran, overthrowing Mohammad Mossadegh. And their first, the first one, they install Nasser in, who's part of the Free Officers movement. And within a few years, he's already going to get help from the Soviets. It's the opposite than what they wanted. They wanted to oust the Soviets from the Middle East, and it was going to be a cat and mouse battle during the Cold War to make sure that they were the dominant power and that their allies were in power. So they had put in Nasser, and before long, Nasser had turned over to the other side because the Americans weren't very trustworthy and weren't very nice and broke all of their promises all of the time.
You ever read Putin's declaration of war on Ukraine? It's called the Empire of Lies speech.
And so they worked out that they needed something, and they started in 1950, 1951, a guy called William Yandell Elliott, who was he's a very significant advisor to 6 presidents, very significant thinker as well, part of the Boys Club. He is a mentor of Henry Kissinger, young Henry Kissinger, and Henry Kissinger was convinced by William Yandell Elliott to create this seminar. Kissinger, in letters to Elliott, claimed that it should be called Yandell Elliott's International Seminar rather than Kissinger's. And what the idea was to have, I think it was 3 or 4 parts. The people would come over and give speeches and hear speeches. So they'd have a young elite that's chosen from loads of different countries around the world. You have to be the top performer, you have to be the most elite student, and you get chosen. If you get chosen, you get brought over, everything will be paid for, and basically is to indoctrinate you before the Soviets indoctrinate you. Because the Soviets, they had these programs going since 1917, 1918, Willy Munzenberg and people.
Oh yeah, they had them going. The British had them going. This all goes back to the Roman Empire and how they ruled. They would bring in the children of the ruling elite into Rome as hostages and educate them, and then send them back to rule those countries from a Roman perspective. This goes back a long way, guys.
But like that, we're proactively creating things like Comintern, which was about training young global leaders. And the West only started doing this post World War II, so 1945. So they put a lot of effort into this. We know that there was Rockefeller money going into it because the Confluence, the magazine, ran alongside Kissinger's International Seminar, was actually funded by Rockefellers. We also know that from 1960 to 1967, so including the time Klaus Schwab went to Kissinger's International Seminar, and Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, which is very intriguing, and a few other world leaders, Valéry Destin, the French.
Pierre Trudeau turned out to be a bit of a traitor. At one point, he tried to leave NATO, get Canada to leave NATO, and his entire cabinet threatened to resign, so he backed down from that. But he was looking into doing that seriously. So sometimes this, like you said, Nasser went to the Soviets. There are more examples of Nasser than what we think.
Prime Minister, an Israeli president or prime minister, a Japanese prime minister, for the future, not at the time, but in the future, they all went through Kissinger's International Seminar, along with a fair few other people. We know from 1960 to 1966, the Kissinger's International Seminar was funded by the Fairfield Foundation, which was the CIA cutout, the Asia Foundation, which was the CIA cutout, and American Friends of the Middle East, which wasn't only a CIA cutout, it was headed up by Kermit Roosevelt, who was the person person who masterminded the first two coups in Egypt and Iran. So, I mean, there's significant CIA players, really. The American Friends of the Middle East was full of people like Virginia Gilder.
Yeah, that's the Arabia School. So all these people who constantly are talking about, like Candace Owens going on and on about how Mossad runs everything and that they were backing all these people back in the day. It's like, Candace, Mossad's a recent, the American Mossad alliance is a recent development. It's not something new that goes back. You got all these waspy, racist, Jewish people running the states until the early 80s. Okay, that's just how it goes. You can look at some of the other history. And Kermit was part of the Arabic School. The Arabic School is a thing that is kind of forgotten now, but for a long time was the major player in running U.S. foreign policy. It was not pro-Israel because Israel was a secular Jew country for most of the time until recently.
The sleeves and others who were so CIA, and they were different CIA. They were an anti-Zionist CIA. It was a very strange one. They believed,
not very strange. It was the predominant. We look at it now and think it's strange. It was not strange then. It was the predominant viewpoint of America. There was the China's Hawks. You had the Arab School Leagues. Those are the two big ones, and of course the Chinese ones blame what's his name for losing China to the communists, but that's not really what happened there. Anyways, story for another day.
in Palestine and keeping Palestine, and they were eventually defeated in about 1967. 1967 is this big reset that happens in the world. 6-Day War happens. You have the American public no longer have anti-Zionist tendencies en masse. They are now amenable to the idea of Israel having power in their own land, and they see the Arabs as breaking somehow some form of peace. The land increases exponentially, and the Zionist idea by people like Nahum Goldman and others. Nahum Goldman, who is one of the major Zionists who helped create Israel in the first place, his son was Guido Goldman, who is Henry Kissinger's best friend and flatmate during this period. So they're very close. There's a lot of friends of Zionists hanging around, and they say, right, we got to make. Nahum Goldman said this. We got to make Israel the center of military strategic power in the world, because then America has access to Asia, Russia, Europe, Africa, the Middle East as a springboard, as a platform from Israel. So Israel, I tend to describe it at this point, Israel becomes America's 51st state. And like I say, they go through a course. So 60 to 66, we know these 3 different CIA cutouts of funding.
Also, the fact is, you have also these Suez pullout that's going to happen around this time, where I think these guys are British guys don't really remember that much about that, which it was the loss of the last real part of the empire.
Funding Kissinger's international seminar. So Klaus Schwab is going through CIA-funded program. His journey there is provided by the Rotary Club Foundation. He actually gets
Wow, I used to be a Rotarian and may well be again. Wow.
There, and he then travels across America to UC Berkeley, with the center of the American nuclear program is at UC Berkeley, and he travels there and he stays there for 6 weeks and works with the main scientists on the main nuclear program. And then he goes back with Herman Kahn and John Kenneth Galbraith, who were given to him through Kissinger's international seminar, to set up the World Economic Forum which eventually is set up in 1971. And it wouldn't be till 1993 that they get to where they really want to go. You know, they had started planning this properly in 1950 and trying it out. But it wasn't until 1993 where they really started to say, okay, now we can do it. We've got the infrastructure. The Soviets have been beaten. The wall has fallen. It's going to be now we can implant into all of these different countries our own leaders through color revolutions. And color revolutions, which was a neoconservative way to cause revolutions in countries by using non-governmental organizations that were run by non-governmental development organizations and organizations like USAID and Soros's organization.
Yeah, non-government organizations. You mean government organizations? I can't help but notice if the government is the one funding it, they are the ones who are running it. So calling these non-government organizations is complete and utter crap.
Etc. One by one, as these countries fall, you've got World Economic Forum, young global leaders going into different countries. In actual fact, if you look at how it worked, 1993, that first one, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown are there. In 4 years, they'll be in power in Britain. It'll be a few years before Angela Merkel's in power, a few years before Orban's in power. It'll be a few years before Sarkozy's in power. It's almost, there's another alternative program as well that's a Russian Patriot program that's also run by the World Economic Forum. There's only 3 people involved in that, and one of them is Vladimir Putin. And in 1999, of course, Boris Yeltsin says that guy's in charge. So, I mean, these programs you would believe they tend to choose people. Now, the Global Leaders for Tomorrow program lasted from 1993 till this is very interesting, this part. I think it was 2004. The Dan David Foundation gave Klaus Schwab a prize, $1 million. They gave Klaus Schwab $1 million, the Dan David Scholarship Prize, Foundation Scholarship Prize, I think it's called. And they said, you can spend it on whatever you like. Now, you'd think he would have spent it on cream tarts and parties for his friends, and maybe a yachting holiday or something like this, or some head rub, lube, whatever, however you like to say. But no, he actually said, oh, no, I'm going to reform the Global Leaders for Tomorrow into the Young Global Leaders, a forum for Young Global. So that was funded. The start of the Young Global Leaders was funded by the Dan David Foundation. And on the board...
What's the deal about the Dan David Foundation?
On the board of the Dan David Foundation at this time is Henry Kissinger, who originally created Kissinger's International Seminar and ends up funding... I wrote an article called The Kissinger Continuum, the unauthorized history of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader program. And it's that round in a circle, and there you go. Kissinger's back again. An old Kissinger, big and fat, sitting in a chair, enjoying his life with his extremely tall, weird wife. And he's the one who's on.
We used to have a show here in Canada called Traders, and traders as in Wall Street, but based in, of course, Toronto. And there's an episode, this show is basically about this guy's, the head of the bank has to withdraw because he's facing criminal investigation. So his daughter, who is a professor at Harvard, comes in and takes over his spot. And there's a lot of shenanigans in the first season based about that. But there's a great line that she has in it. Sort of like, you know what Henry Kissinger used to do before he bombed the hell out of North Vietnam, or bombed the hell out of Vietnam? He was a professor of economics at Harvard.
On the board that's giving $1 million to Klaus Schwab so he can create this forum for young global leaders, which is again just a manifestation of the intelligence leadership program that keeps intelligence agents in power and intelligence in power. Yes. If you actually go through the people who are involved in young global leaders, year by year. It's astounding. They are like, they've got nefarious histories, every single one of them. Like I remember in 2021, 2022, I was looking for a couple of people, and it was like, oh, they were heavily involved in all of the banking crisis stuff. Oh, actually, when you look at it, it looks like they might have actually caused certain parts of it, and you realize that they put the guiltiest people into power, so you can actually find articles and stories by following these people, because anybody that these people, the mark of the beast and the World Economic Forum gives a young global leader, you know that person's going to have done really bad stuff for the deep state in the past.
Yes, and they'll do that in the future, as Tony Blair, for example, did, and Bill Gates did, and is doing. Okay, Johnny, you are, for people watching this, right, you are a person of concern, a journalist of concern in the Epstein files. So you must have been in the Global Leaders Program yourself, right? So when you arrive there, with all expenses paid, first class, 5-star hotel, right? And then they start training you. What did they do to you, Johnny?
They put things in me butt. No. I have to say one thing. J.K. Rowling is a young global leader. Work that one out. Imagine you wanted to control both sides of a debate. Imagine you wanted to control one side and you wanted to control the other side. And then suddenly you recruit, train both of them, and then they leave. And one goes, I'm completely the opposite. Viktor Orban, he's completely the opposite, is he? Is he completely the opposite? Or created antithesis?
Yeah, that is a good thought. Is this created antithesis? I tend to believe this is less that. I just think some people go through the program, like Putin going through the Russian Patriots program, or Viktor Orban, or even Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Sometimes they guys get minds of their own, and they don't like to they have their own goals and objectives, and they pursue them. So I'm not too sure I buy this whole idea that, like Nasser betrayed them and went and worked for the Soviets. Yeah, I think that's much more the result of this, but it is an interesting thought. Are they really controlling both sides of the argument? The evidence I'm get is no, but it's an interesting idea.
Okay, J.K. Rowling, I didn't know that. Was that before she published her books?
2003, 2004? After.
Can't remember.
After.
Oh, okay.
1996, 1997, Harry Potter comes out.
Oh,
They've already got about 2 movies by that point, I'm sure.
Okay,
3 movies, maybe.
Because otherwise, that's really, really stinking worrying, right? I mean, I think it was.
I know it causes concern, doesn't it? I'm a journalist. I'm
going to verify, because you're a journalist of concern, right? When was Harry Potter first published?
I reckon 1998, 1997.
1997, yeah.
Yeah, I do quiz nights, so I'm good at this sort of stuff.
Okay, so when was she in the Young Global?
I think it's 2003, 2004. I mean, you can check it up. You could,
because what I was thinking was that she was in the Global Leaders Program, and then the Harry Potter books came out.
No,
okay, I'm a bit reassured. You're a bit
reassured that she only sold out after she got become rich.
No, that the stories are good. They're untainted by Kissinger and Schwab.
Well, half of them. Remember, they get darker as you go along.
They do get darker.
They do get darker, don't they? The more
right. A bit like this conversation, Johnny, when you bring in J.K. Rowling as a dark character.
It gets uncomfortable.
The thing about the controlled opposition, could it not also be that J.K. Rowling goes in, Viktor Orban goes in, Vladimir Putin goes in, right? And then at some point they have this epiphany and say, look, this is not for me. And that they authentically set themselves up in opposition. Because they're like, I'm not doing that no more.
Oh man, this sounds like a fairy tale.
No,
I
but that's
want this
possible for
world.
you.
I want to live in your world where that happens,
Well,
really, and you can give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and it turns out they are innocent in the end.
Well-
Because the world I live in, it turns the opposite tends to happen in my. I have in the past lived in that world. I really have, and I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but then I've had some real harsh wake up calls, and I've also do a lot of research, and like even like with the Epstein case, when I'm researching people like Youngkerman and other people, I'm thinking to myself, they're probably not as bad as I'm making it out in my head. And then you see the emails and you realize they're actually worse.
Yeah.
And what you've done is you keep giving benefit of the doubt to bad people. You keep missing the point.
Okay.
And that's that.
I can get that about Nicole Junkerman. We did a whole video, and people should go and watch that and go and check out newspace.com, where Johnny's done a lot of work about her and what she represents. But say if Vladimir Putin, there's so much that he's doing that's antithetical to the globalist plans. George Soros said a few years ago that if we lose Ukraine, we've lost. He's closed the borders. He's fought Christianity.
I think that's balls. I don't think he's really for Christianity. I think that he's creating the Sberbank app to be exactly the same as X is being created, which is exactly the same as other everything apps that are being created, like the WeChat, is it, or the app in China. He's making the Sberbank app to be a technocratic solution. They offer a Russian technocratic alternative to the technocracy, but it's exactly the same as the technocracy. It's just got a Russian hat on. That's all it is. All of the alternatives that he offer is just a Russian brand of neoconservatism with a lot of hyper normalization dolloped on top. And in the fifth generation warfare world, I think once the Russians get involved, then everything will go really wild and mad all of the time. We'll be crapping ourselves.
Okay, they may be doing that because they're a ruthless leader and that, people in power want to have more power and accountability, right? But human society is full of division, full of disagreement. It's not necessarily bad division or whatever, right? But if I think about my family, my extended family, there are some people that are like this and they agree with this, and some people are like that and they agree with that, and some people hold this position and some people hold that. I mean, just organizing a bloody holiday, say with 20 of my cousins, is a bloody nightmare. And yet it seems to me that what you're saying is all these people went into the Global Leaders Program and now they're pretty much doing what they were trained to do that serves the interests of the Great Reset. And I'm saying, wait a minute, humans are way more diverse, or have I misunderstood you?
They're not doing what they've trained to be doing. It's not training. They're not being trained. They're being told. That's the future. The future is the everything app. The future is RNA technology. The future is mega cities. The future is advanced partnership. The future is stakeholder capitalism. The future is you don't get a say over. You're not being trained on it. You're being told that's the way it is, and you're going to go back. And if you even did think you go against that world in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to make any money. Your country's going to collapse by itself.
Yeah, and that's where this guy is. We're noticing that's not what's happening here in Russia, right? And China. So there's different forms of this. I think these guys or in Hungary. And so maybe he's gone down too far the rabbit hole, maybe. I don't know. But I just think I could buy the argument that he's doing the Russian version of this, but I think I think Putin is in opposition to the WEF, and I think people, like he said at the beginning, Nasser betrayed for the Soviets. So I think they may well be putting together their own version, the Russian tinge of it. But I do see it as like the Russian economy is not collapsing, right? But he's British, so he gets to live in a world where he's constantly bombarded every day with like Russia's on the verge of collapse and it's going to do this and all that. And it's like Russia has a bunch of stuff that everyone wants, including the United States. Who's the number one buyer of Russian uranium? Oh, look, the United States of America.
And all of the different things, because the infrastructure has been made for just that. So they're being told what the future looks like. They're not being trained in some sort of mechanism for they go away and create their own version of what gets them to that point that the future looks like that they've been told. So I think the world, what you're mistaken is that the Young Global Leaders program, the young global leaders are being trained outside society to take forward what they know it's going to be like, and the people who get chosen accept that the globalists and the think tanks are right. So when they go in there, they're not being like manipulated and trained into thinking that way. They've already been chosen to be those people that are completely with it. Now, that includes the fact that some are going to go back to their country, and their country's repulsed by an idea of a European style this, or a stakeholder capitalism this, or a Western ideal over here. The Russians and the Hungarians don't like it, so they have to manage it in a different way. They're still managing it, and they're still being told where the gold is at the end of the rainbow, because they're being told where the gold is. Anywhere else leads to no gold. They go to these courses, they learn about how to make the gold. And so they go, and what you're going to do, go home and not make the gold? And you tell whatever you're going to tell to the people. And it's always going to be a fairy tale. It's always going to be a story that says you're working for their best interest, and don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. And we want to think the best in people, but these are elite politicians, and we should know better by now. They're not the ones who are telling us the truth. They're not the ones who are after our best interest. They're not the ones who are building a society that's fit for us. It's fit for us to work for them. There's always that at the end of it, that we're supposed to be in service, in servitude, paying some form of tax so they can have their wars, they can have their games, they can have all of their luxury, and we pay for it all. And the system is created to move wealth towards them. That's the system we're in. That's the unfair system. Got to reject it at some point.
But are you saying there's no one in leadership who's like opposed to this?
No.
Like, I'm not doing this, playing this game. Trump,
No.
Rory.
Well, that's very
No,
depressing.
Trump is like the perfect example of the intelligence already being in charge. I mean, we're seeing fifth generation warfare being rolled out by an intelligence infrastructure that knows Trump can just be there up front as a meme while they are distracting the hell out of people. The same with Joe Biden. What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of depressing. I'm not going to continue watching that. And it's just like, there's no difference. They're all the same. Give me a break, guy. Come on. Anyways, so that was just a bit kind of like everything's factionalized. There are groups within groups. And to think that it's all just part of one master plan, a friend of mine, is just a little ridiculous. Anyways, thanks to you for tuning in and listening and watching. If you like this and want to see me more and help me out, like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be back tomorrow.